Good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for inviting me tonight.
You're welcome.
To begin with, I'm going to discuss my experience from a very young age with Asperger syndrome and ADHD. I spent my early years in South Africa, where I had an amazing childhood, where I experienced the lovely weather, spent a lot of time at the beach, and did amazing things like go on big game drives, where I saw amazing wildlife, and I did sharp edge diving and mountain climbing as well. South Africa is a perfect environment for a child with ADHD, as there is lots of space, a wide sense of freedom, and an amazing outdoor lifestyle. And you don't have to start school properly until age 6 to 7 either. When I was 15, it was definitely the right time to come back to the UK in terms of my education. You see, in South Africa, it's quite hard to get a formal diagnosis, and by then it was clear I learned differently, and to access the right support, I needed the label. I'm often asked if I wished I'd been labelled earlier. My parents knew I was different right from the start, and certainly by age 3. I was showing autistic and ADHD traits at this time. In England, you see, we like to put everyone in a box, but where I lived, you are more accepted for who you are, which is a good thing. I had access to many different therapies to help my sensory system, which was out of sync at birth. And this meant that I was very sensitive to the slightest of touch. I hated bright lights, and I also hated the sound of vacuum cleaners as well. The therapies were a lot cheaper over in South Africa than here. I had physio, occupational therapy horseback, auditory integration therapy, and visual therapy. Now obviously that's not all, but I'm not going to list all of them. You'll be here all night. Looking back, I never questioned why I had to go to all of these things. It was just what we did. But each thing helped. Sometimes it helped me at the time, and sometimes we didn't see changes until much later. But the good thing is that it helped me tackle the root cause, which was my sensory system, rather than just the symptoms, which is all my teachers suggested I should go on medication for. At school, I suffered from horrendous bullying, which led to meltdowns at home. I felt down most of the time because I had no friends, and even worse, the teachers didn't get me at all. I was bright enough to cope academically in primary school, but in secondary school, I really suffered with the work. And due to my lack of confidence, I never asked for help. And this was when I really began to fall behind. This also had a negative impact on my parents, who tried their real best to help me. And I've been to a total of 15 different schools, and my parents were always trying to find the right school for me. And like Michael said earlier, bullying was a big problem, and the way to get out of it is by moving schools. But in order to find a school which met my needs, where I was treated with respect, and which geared up to help me, I only found that school when we moved back to the UK 6 years ago. I was seen as a major challenge half the time, and I do admit, I understand why people saw that, because when I felt that everyone at school was against me because of my difference, and the teachers weren't being nice either, I played up big time as a result. When I was showing all the signs of severe ADHD and Asperger's, it brought major challenges, as I did some incredibly daft things in the past, many of which cost my parents an absolute fortune, others of which caused humiliation for everyone, and ruined friendships for my family too. Even worse though, was when one of my silly little ADHD incidents almost got me arrested. Through all of this, my parents were asked to put me on Ritalin, but decided to take me for various therapies, give me natural supplements and lots of life coaching instead, because they decided Ritalin was not the answer. Because I came across someone at one of the schools I went to who was on Ritalin, and his growth was stunted severely by it. However, it is not for me to say whether it's right or wrong to put your child on Ritalin, because everyone's different, but I know that it definitely wasn't right for me. I am pleased to announce now, though, that my life is unrecognisable from back then. After being diagnosed at the age of 15 in 2011, I was eventually statemented and was given support at school, and regularly saw someone who I could chat about all my struggles with. This was exactly what I needed, as each day when I was feeling down and struggling with something, after a session with this support tutor, I felt so much better afterwards. I then started to make some friends, real ones for the first time, as I have been a victim of mate crime throughout my life. And I'll never forget the day when this boy who I thought was my friend showed me that he wasn't my friend really, he just was pretending to be, so he could bully me later on in life. And I knew this when he had a big party and he invited everyone in the entire class apart from me. I also started to get my school grades up at this time, and I'll never forget the day when I went into school on GCSE results day and I passed all of them. That was one of my biggest achievements yet. And recently, I obtained a merit grade in Animal Management Level 3 BTEC at school, which enabled me to get onto a higher level animal management course at Solihull College this year. I've also got a one-day-a-week work placement at the Guide Dogs for the Blind, where I hope to work in the future. About 2.5 years ago, I decided to take up magic, which has had the most positive impact on my life to date. It has helped me gain credibility with my peers, and for the first time, I've found a way to break into conversations, which I've always found hard. Things can still overwhelm me to this day, and I won't pretend it's all roses in the garden, but with maturity and support of my family, I am maturing in so many different areas which I never thought possible. And a perfect example of this is driving. I'm a qualified driver now, and it doesn't seem long since I was thinking I'd never get that far. Magic is my special interest, and my advice to any parent here is to teach your child using their special interest where possible. I wasn't interested in reading, as I couldn't focus for long, but I'm able to sit now for ages learning new tricks from books. But I do, however, prefer to learn from magic teaching videos, which I find much easier. One last recommendation I'd like to make is to get your child involved in a social support group, because I have found this much more useful than any one-to-one session with a psychologist. It is important that we realise that we are not alone with our loneliness, and social groups enable us to practice our social interaction in a real-life situation. With neurotypicals, we don't expect every single neurotypical to be friends with every single other neurotypical, and it's the same like that with Asperger's. I had high hopes once of building a friendship with this boy who had Asperger's, my age, who I met at a support group once, but after meeting up with him once, I realised straight away it wouldn't work, because his interest was to sit chatting about current affairs for ages, and I have an ADHD side to me, which means that I need to be more active, and as a result I need to meet people who like being active as well, and who I share interests with. I do admit though, that when I took part in social support groups, it did give me a chance to make some really good friends, because I knew that all the people who were in that group with me were all in the same boat. And when I met people who also have Asperger's syndrome, I come to realise that we both have something very large in common, which can contribute towards a very close friendship. Like I mentioned before though, it doesn't always work, but it does sometimes. To end with, I'm going to talk about how I manage my stress. Originally, I used to manage stress by throwing stones and smashing glass. And this did work, but it did end in disaster most of the time. As nowadays, I tend to go running to calm me down, and it actually does a really good job of it. And it's a great way to manage stress, as it is much cheaper for everyone. I really enjoy running, and it releases energy. But I also run when I know that I've eaten too much sugar, because I do get stressed when I eat a lot of sugar, because the thought of getting fat and getting diabetes and illness, etc., stresses me out a fair bit. So what advice can I give to parents who have children who are behaving inappropriately? Be patient, and I know they're not behaving this way on purpose, it is just their way of surviving. And I know from my own experience that it does get better with maturity. Because I'm much better now at thinking before speaking than I was even a year ago. For example, there have been many moments when I've told inappropriate jokes to the wrong people, and also asked personal questions, and been over-honest. And a perfect example of this is when we had a family friend of ours who lost her husband, and I thought, when my mum told me this, that it was my great uncle, who I didn't know much at the time, but I knew what he looked like. And when we had a get-together shortly afterwards, and he came to the get-together, I saw him and I said, I thought you were dead. I am much better now after maturing over the years, what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate to come out with in front of people. And it is not easy, to be fair, but it is not impossible to think before speaking. There will, however, be moments, like I have as well, when we fail at thinking first, but it doesn't happen too often. People who you know are worth knowing will forgive you generally as well, especially if they understand you. So my message to all parents is to keep believing in your children and understand them as best you can, because that is what they need exactly. I know that the road through school for Aspies can be incredibly tough, but once you've made it through, you have so many opportunities waiting for you, and you have the ability to achieve so much success. Because I do have to admit, I never thought I'd be where I am now, when I look back at previous years. And this is where the saying comes in, which I've always remembered: there is a light at the end of every tunnel. This may be difficult at the moment, but all you have to do is keep expecting more, do your best, and remember, never, ever give up. My parents did this for me throughout my life, and that has made me the man I am today. Thank you.